I appreciate all of your patience, and I'm sorry to use it. We've been obviously working through a very traumatic incident that occurred at one of our recreation centers just yesterday. This is something that is astounding and unusual for us, and we don't have a standard playbook to address. My team and I just came out of a very long conversation with staff at the rec center geared around understanding how something like that could happen yesterday and how we take as many steps as we can identify to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. Anytime any person is harmed in our community, it's horrific and it's tragic. When it's a young person, that adds a distinct trauma to that situation. When a young person is harmed at a space that we identify, that we stand up, that we support, that we resource as a safe space for our children, it's particularly harrowing for us. What happened yesterday is layers and layers of grief for our community on so many levels that fill us all with questions that we have to acknowledge. We won't tie up with a pretty bow today or this week. We have to understand that if we decide that we as a community are going to be a place, we as a state are going to be a place, we as a country are going to be a place where it's easy for folks to get their hands on a gun, then that means that every conflict has the potential of turning into gunfire. We think about the space that we're talking about today, Jimmy Lee Recreation Center, is a multi-million-dollar aquatic center, a recreation center that draws families and young people, not just from across our city, but from across our entire region, because it is such a strong, vibrant, robust space. In many ways, it is, I think of it as the prototype of the type of space that we know that we need for our children, from high-quality facilities to staff that is second to none, to the parents and community members and the young people who will tell you today that space, they always say, is my rec center, theirs. I grew up as one of those young people who knew that space as my rec center, along with the space that we're in right now. You know this well. The events of yesterday are currently under investigation. And so that makes us limited in what information we're able to put out publicly. The victim's family has asked to remain anonymous. So I know there are rumors and things like that out there, but out of respect for them, we will not be sharing their identities in this space. A suspect is in custody, and we thank the diligent work of our St. Paul Police Department for investigating quickly and taking action quickly to ensure that we could say what we said yesterday, and that was that we did not anticipate further threat to public safety with regard to this incident. I've seen the rumors, of course, the conversation about the possibility that the suspect is an employee of the city of St. Paul. That is accurate. The suspect is an employee of the city of St. Paul. With the investigations continuing, the investigation's underway. As you know well, there are both the criminal investigations underway as well as human resources processes underway that I can't shortcut by speaking to specifically around. State law prohibits the city of St. Paul from prohibiting carrying firearms in our recreation centers. Our state law says that as the mayor of the city of St. Paul, as the government of the city of St. Paul, we cannot say you can't carry a gun in this space. I think that is a state law that is wrong, that should be changed as quickly as possible. With the exception of our St. Paul Police Department, we do, as a city, prohibit city employees from carrying firearms at work. And so that element of this will certainly be a part of the ongoing investigation. We're in the process right now of unpacking all of this with our leadership team, with our frontline staff, with our community members as well, with very clear focus on identifying every step that we can take to prevent a tragedy like this from occurring in our community ever again. That includes, for starters, working with our frontline staff, working with young people and the families who have been directly or indirectly traumatized by yesterday's incident to ensure that they have resources to help support their mental and emotional health as they process and grieve the incidents that occurred yesterday. We are holding in prayer. We are holding in our care all of the families involved. We're holding in our care the victim and praying for his full recovery and intent as a community on continuing to stand up that community first public safety framework that we've talked about so much to help us not just respond well after something terrible happens in our community, but to help us identify the type of data-driven proven efforts that can help us reduce the number of critical incidents that we find ourselves responding to in the first place. Thank you very much. I can take any questions.
Can you give us a general idea of what maybe happened? Obviously, a lot of investigatory work lies ahead, but what, generally, what happened? A lot of people are just trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah, I can. So right now we're less than 24 hours into this, so we're still trying to sort through that. What I can tell you is that our officers were called to the Oxford Rec Center at 4:12 p.m. yesterday on what was reported as a shooting. They did locate a teenage male there who appeared to have a gunshot wound to the head. We were able to get St. Paul fire medics there very quickly. They transported that person to Regions, and they are in critical condition. Our investigation led out into the neighborhood, which I think is one of the things that really brought a lot of attention to this. Early on, we were not sure exactly if the person had fled on foot or where they had gone. That investigation very quickly narrowed, and we were able to locate the person we believe responsible for this and a firearm very shortly after this event. And thankfully, all that happened without any injury to anybody else.
Can we get the correct pronunciation of the suspect's name, please? Does anybody have that?
I can. Correct pronunciation is Xavier Binford.
Xavier.
Yep.
Thank you.
What is his title or role with the city?
He has been employed with the city on an on and off basis since 2013 in several different roles, and the most current is
Community Recreation Specialist.
Community Recreation Specialist.
And what does that role do?
I can speak to that. Community Recreation Specialist is the lead point of contact within a rec center for programs and day-to-day operations, engagement of young people, and just seeing the processes through on a day-to-day basis for all rec center functions.
Does he or that role have direct contact with young people, or is it more
Yes.
parents?
Yes.
Yes.
I would say the broader community. Anyone can walk through a rec center, and that our staff can interact with anyone. So yes, young people, adults, seniors, all ages.
Any issues with him in the past? Any discipline or anything like that?
That's not something I can disclose at this time in terms of active investigation. So.
Did you know that he was carrying at work?
Again, that's something I can't speak to at this point in time.
Does he work at the rec center?
To reiterate what I said, city policy, to reiterate what I said, with the exception of St. Paul police officers, obviously, city policy bans St. Paul public employees from carrying firearms at work.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just ask you, so you're saying this team was shot by an employee of the rec center who had a gun in the rec center?
I'm saying that is that is allegedly what happened. Obviously, this is still under investigation, and so there are an enormous set, there's an almost endless set of questions that we all have, that we all continue to have, that I'm very hopeful will be resolved by the investigation, so that we understand exactly what you're asking.
What do you say to residents, though? I mean, a lot of people send their kids there and are thrilled that their kids are at these rec centers doing stuff that's positive. I mean, what do you say to people who are going to be shocked by this?
We are shocked by this, and I am one of those parents who sends my children to our rec centers in general, as well as the Jimmy Lee Recreation Center in specific. So we are shocked by this. We ought to be shocked by this, and our perspective will continue to be that every effort that we can make, from what happens on the ground at our recreation center, to how we engage our young people, to how we establish our policy framework on a state level around gun violence, ought to all be geared together on preventing anything like this from ever happening anywhere in our state ever again.
Did you say that you send your own children to that rec center?
Absolutely. I grew up in that rec center. My father's here. He grew up in that rec center. This is very much a space that is an intimate space for me personally.
After this, will there be any increased security measures? Are we looking at metal detectors when kids come in, or employees come in the doors?
Like I said, we just came out of a 2.5-hour meeting with our frontline staff to address questions exactly like that. I've got a couple of pages of notes on it, all the conversations that we just had, and at this point, we have to be in a space where everything is on the table.
What's
Any idea when things reopen at this point? Any idea when things reopen over there at this point?
No, we are not racing to reopen that space. We have a lot of work to do to provide care and support for the young people who were in the space yesterday, for our frontline staff, and that is our top priority right now.
We had an employee tell us yesterday that they left because they had seen things escalate there and didn't like the fights and different things that they had seen developing at the rec center, even in the last year a little bit. Can anyone speak to whether there was an environment there or any kind of conflicts that have been going on that needed to be addressed?
We've talked at great length about the extent to which we have seen a lot of things shift in our community, particularly over the last several years. That's, of course, a part of a national trend that we're seeing. That doesn't make it better in St. Paul. It just helps us understand what the origins of the challenges that we're facing are. We, frankly, hear from our police department quite a bit that the number of illegal guns that we find is going up significantly. Again, as I said earlier, I think there's a number of things that we ought to be doing as far as state policy to make it a little harder for folks to get their hands on a firearm. And we're hoping to work closely with our legislative delegation to help reduce access to firearms in our community, because as I said earlier, if everybody has a gun, then every conflict has the potential of turning into a gunfight, and that creates challenges not just for St. Paul but around the country. There are a significant number of factors that have led us to this space, and we ought to be in a space where we address all of them. That's not just our Parks and Recreation Department's role. That's not just our police department's job. That's my job. That's our job as a community. That's the job of every elected leader at every level who represents this state. and we're going to insist that we all kind of do that work together.
Is there a law, I may have misunderstood you, but did you say there was a law that prevented people from being told they can't carry a weapon?
We are preempted by state law from most things regarding firearms, because that's a space that is held primarily in state law, in the state law space. I believe the state law specifically says that we cannot. There are exemptions. You can obviously ban firearms in schools and other spaces like that. Our recreation centers, which, as we all know, are spaces that we build, that we staff, that we resource, that we design for children, for young people, as learning spaces, as active spaces after school and in the summertime. The state law specifically says that we cannot ban guns in those spaces. We'd like to see that. Well, I probably am sharing with you what I think about that now. We think that law needs to change as soon as possible.
Was the gun legally owned by the alleged suspect?
Again, I apologize, but being less than 24 hours in, that's just too soon for us to know. And we haven't even figured out everything we know about the firearm that we recovered.
Was the suspect actually working at the time this happened?
Not to sound like a broken record with the chief, but those are facts that we're trying to unravel right now in terms of what actually transpired, whether he's working or not working.
Or was he scheduled to work?
Rec centers are very dynamic, where schedules can change on a dime. So we are trying to figure out what the scheduling components were and all those things to find out the answer to that question.
Can you give us your name and title, please?
Yeah, I'm the park director for St. Paul. My name is Andy Rodriguez.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just to clarify though, he specifically was assigned to work at that rec center?
That is his assigned rec center, correct. Yep.
Do we know if there was an argument or anything that transpired between these two ahead of the shooting?
Again, I apologize. We're still looking into all of that. Obviously, and there were some questions about the inside of the rec center. This event obviously happened outside in the parking lot. And so there's just, we're still putting all those pieces together and figuring out exactly what took place and what, if anything, led up to this event.
Mayor, have you reached out to Governor Walz or to legislators regarding the bill that you mentioned, prohibiting firearms in rec centers, or prohibiting your prohibition of that?
I was in direct touch with both Governor Walz as well as many members of our legislative delegation last night. That, what I just described, is in our in our city's legislative agenda. It was before yesterday. It's a policy that we believe needs to change right away. That's been in our legislative agenda. The conversations we had last night were not about our legislative agenda or future policies. The conversations we had last night as we were trying to figure out how to unfold what happened yesterday was all about addressing the trauma underfoot.
We have a sense
I
of,
believe you said that the person being taken into custody is a community recreation specialist.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could you describe what does that job entail?
Yeah, absolutely. So that involves a lot of day-to-day program implementation for our young people in our community overall, and then day-to-day presence within the facility for anyone that would walk through the door. So if I want to register for swimming lessons or other things, that position acts like a point of contact for that, and then any other classes, programs that happen at the center.
How long was he at the recreation center working?
For about close to a year at this specific location.
was he specifically kind of in charge of that rec center?
There are multiple leadership levels at the rec center, and he is one in a leadership level.
Okay. And do you have any sense about how many children or young people would have either witnessed this or experienced the aftermath of it?
I don't have that information at this time.
As you all know, we navigate a difficult balance between trying to get information as soon as possible and also trying to make sure that we don't provide any inaccurate information. And so that's why, particularly given the existence of ongoing investigations, there's always things that are within and beyond the scope of what we're able to share at a given time. We'll of course continue to keep you and our community who have rightfully an enormous number of questions about all of this informed as further information becomes available.
Do you know when, for example, we might hear about the status of the gun and any more details?
There's going to be some testing that goes into the firearm we recovered that will help us identify whether or not that was the firearm used, or and some other pieces. That's all kind of lab result contingent. I wouldn't expect anything directly confirming anything related to that by at the very earliest end of next week. Again, we take these processes very seriously, and we have to make sure that we're handling everything in the exact right way. It's a very important case.
Mr. Rodriguez, if I could just ask you one question. I know you don't know exactly how many kids were there, but it's a very big building.
Mm-hmm.
Approximately on any given day at that time after school, how many kids would be there? Are we talking dozens, or are we talking more than 100?
Yeah, that's a great question. After school time is usually our most popular time, from 3 to 6. So, and multiple gyms and programs going on. It's probably safe to say around 100 kids or less. But keep in mind that there are multiple gyms. There's a downstairs level that we need to account for that a nonprofit runs, so scattered throughout the building.
Do any of you recall a time that a school closed as a result of violence like this, and were any of you involved with advising the schools about that decision making?
I would say that we are in very close contact with the school district on this particular incident, and work very closely with them day to day on any incident management between the rec center and the school.
Does anyone remember a time that the school is closed?
Not offhand, no. We did speak directly, and to Director Rodriguez's point, we were in direct contact last night in real time with Superintendent Gothard, with Principal Ayers at Central High School as well, to make sure that we had kind of all of those loops closed together. I know Central made the decision to cancel classes, but have the building open in case students wanted to be there or needed a meal today. And so those are decisions that we've made in concert with kind of constantly engaging with one another. So we'll continue to work together on all of these matters because obviously our children, those children who are in after-school programs at our recreation center, many of them are in our St. Paul Public Schools as well. And one of the things that we endeavor to do is sort of not let anyone fall through the gaps, is to be able to work together on behalf of our young folks, to work together to address the needs of and the challenges of the students and the community members who we serve. Again, we see a number of those students who are traumatized by what happened yesterday. And so, I appreciate the school districts taking it as seriously as they have. I appreciate the Parks and Rec employees who provided critical first aid. Our fire department responded immediately and was able to transport the victim to the hospital. We appreciate that, and that's, of course, those are life-saving techniques and endeavors that they produced. And we certainly appreciate the work of the St. Paul Police Department to help bring a suspect into custody and recover a firearm as quickly as possible. Those are encouraging moments out of really one of the toughest things that we've endured as a city in a while.
Time for one more.
And Mayor, this was related to the Marcus Golden settlement, or settlement rather. Was heard from the family today what drove the city to settle? Was there anything brought forth by the family that also drove the city to settle?
I haven't heard the family statement today. I'm sorry, we've been in this space for hours here today, so I'm not prepared to speak on any statement that the family made today.
When it comes to, emotions are high today. Obviously, things are closed, but not all rec centers around the city are closed.